Okay, we're back here with you guys. So we're planning to add another track to the Microsoft 365 security webinars. The track that we're on, that is the 8 a.m. PST for most of the Azure security products, and we would like to see if we add this track, what preference you will have. If you go to the next screen here, you can be part of the survey by simply either using the link that I just posted or go to pollev.com/security webinar. So this is for the morning session preference, and let's give it some time here for the folks to participate. Okay. Let's move on to the next one, which is for the afternoon, and looks like you guys got here already, which is great. Okay, and if you don't mind sharing your screen once again, or so I can move over to the welcome slide and kick it off. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for being a part of our community. My name is Valon Kalika, and I'll be your host for today. A few reminders before we kick off our session. If at any time you experience issues viewing the stream and are using the web browser version of Teams, please refresh your browser. If you're using the desktop app of Teams, please exit and rejoin. This seems to help for the most of the time regarding the connection issues. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast, and you can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on the Ask a Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can also post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. Now, we often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. But in the event if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this webinar, please don't hesitate to raise them on Microsoft Defender for Identity forum at aka.ms/MDI community. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve on these webinars, and you can do so at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. I would also like to invite you to join our public community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products, and you'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which, by the way, you can sign up for at aka.ms/security-prp. You can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or just simply join on webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. In today's session, Tsemah will go over the proactive identity posture management using Microsoft Defender for Identity. or is a senior product manager with the Microsoft Defender for Identity team. And without further ado, I will turn it over to him. Or the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valon. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from your part of the world. My name is Tsemah, and Valon, you did a great job pronouncing my last name. Actually, yes, Or is my first name or given name. It sounds like a SQL injection, but that's just my name. It means light in Hebrew, and I'm in, joined Microsoft about 7 years ago, based out of Tel Aviv, Israel. Talking to you today out of my home office, and I'm also senior product manager in the Microsoft Defender for Identity team, which is part of the M365 Defender suite. With me are Banu and Ricky from our product team as well, which will be monitoring the chat window and will be also verbalizing your content in the final Q&A session, where we hope to provide you with the answers for the question that may arise during the webinar. And as Valen said, this webinar is all about proactive security, specifically proactive security using the Microsoft Defender for Identity security assessments, which is part or a major part of every organization plan to mitigate or at least be more resilient against cyber threats. And is also proactive security is also a major part of all of Microsoft security products. Specifically regarding Defender for Identity. Defender for Identity is a product that aims toward protecting your on-premise identity from cyber attacks. It does that by providing 4 major security pillars. The first is Prevent, which we're going to dive into today, and involves several security assessments that by deploying the Defender for Identity solution, automatically you start getting evaluation regarding what is your state of security posture. Then again, we also have the detect pillar, which is things that get past your security perimeter or went unannounced, or even 0 days that are being exploited. Defender for Identity uses complex algorithm and real-time analytics in order to detect malicious behavior or suspicious behavior and give you all the context that a security team needs in order to better understand what is going on throughout their environment, in combination with other Microsoft 365 security products such as Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, and also Azure Active Directory Identity Protection. Investigate means that even if we not only supply security alerts, but also give context in regards, for example, whether or not specific users should be investigated into abnormal behavior, meaning that if a user has accessed a sensitive resource for the first time, that might not be something that your security operations team should be alerted on, but it is something that security products aim toward providing security teams so they can get better context into what is actually happening in their environment, and also testing hypotheses such as, is a particular user is doing something that he shouldn't do. So investigate is again a major pillar in every security product that aim toward providing more visibility into what is currently going on in an environment. And of course, respond, meaning when we decide that something is currently happening in the environment and we need to block it, such as disabling a user or isolating a machine, Microsoft security products aim toward providing those capabilities in well. Preferably, when you have the whole suite, you can have a full investigation into different parts of the organization and have a single response capability to better get what we call time to resolve, or decreasing the time to resolve for security threats. And of course, these products are built into toward providing modern organization security value, organization that are operating in cloud environment, but also have an on-premise footprint, which we learned that customers and users still they have no plans on removing these in the couple of years. So when cyber attacks happen, Microsoft product aim toward being whenever the user environment is, whether it is on premise or hosted on an IaaS environment, infrastructure as a service, or in cloud components. So what do a typical attack looks like? Usually when attackers try to target an organization, they might start by sending a phishing email, making the user click on a URL or open an attachment, which leads to exploitation of the first device in the chain. This realm is Microsoft has products such as Defender for Office 365 and Microsoft Cloud App Security, and even Windows 10 security capabilities such as Smart Screen that aim toward stopping the attacks in here. But we also understand that some attacks do not start from a URL or an email. Some user might find a thumb drive lying around or execute a program that they copied at a computer. So everything ends up leading to exploitation of a single entity and leads to more bad stuff, installation maybe of a second payload that leads to an attacker communicating with command and control channel, eventually getting into a state where they can say, hey, we're in the organization. They achieve what we call persistence. And again, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is the tool that aims toward finding out these blocking at the entry, but also finding out any malicious attempts that might happen in this area. Defender for Identity, alongside Azure Active Directory Identity Protection and Cloud App Security, goes um, in the path between a certain endpoint is being exploited, and now the attackers are usually doing some sort of reconnaissance and lateral movements in order to gain elevated privileges, in order to scan the environment, finding out how the environment looks like, try to find out what their next path. It might be the on-premise domain controller. It might be the security administrator user that is synced to the cloud against security best practices. But all of these end up usually when an attacker try to control the entire environment, what we call domain dominance. And at this point, they either, in some cases, deploy ransomware, sometimes they exfiltrate data, and sometimes they just regain persistence to the environment for later uses. All of these are meant to show you that Microsoft, throughout the security products, try to look at the attack kill chain and provide visibility and tools in order to mitigate it every step in the way. But as we all know, a good defense starts with making sure that the environment that we have does not have any gaping holes in the form of security misconfiguration or out of date systems, and a lot of things that um, security teams are always struggling to maintain. And also they need to do it in a continuous fashion, making sure that it's not a one-time effort to go and reconfigure your environment according to security best practices. This is where Defender for Identity comes in. And so today we're gonna have a look about what are the current identity assessment provided by the Defender for Identity product. And also, we're going to talk a bit about maybe what's coming. As you know, bad guys do not rest, so the defenders can rest as well. We always need to be one step before the next exploitation happen and try to see if we detect any new type of configuration that we have learned to lead to potential compromise. We're going to look at how Defender for Identity, including the assessment, is also being wrapped up in Microsoft 365 Security Portal, which include capabilities such as Microsoft Secure Score to have a more unified view of your environment and trying to build a map or an action plan in order to fix all the detected security posture issues and also make sure that they don't come back. And then we're going to use some advanced tools such as Microsoft 365 Advanced Hunting to extend the security assessment. We're going to show you the real power of the Microsoft 365 suite. And the real power comes toward combining several security products such as Defender for Identity and Defender for Endpoint in order to get a really tight grip on the security control and getting into the essentials of what's need to be remediated. And of course, everything is going to be with lots of demos because this is how I found a good webinar should always be. Again, I want to remind you, use the chat window to post questions. We probably can answer them live, but we will aggregate them and we try to answer them throughout the session, and we also want to keep them into the final Q&A session. So we're going to start with the security posture assessment. Security posture assessment in terms of Defender for Identity comes in the form of making sure that what Defender for Identity aims toward protecting, which are your on-premise identities and your on-premise identity infrastructure, is configured according to, I think, what is known for a long time that Microsoft has always recommended. For example, removal of legacy authentication methods that are known to be compromised and can be brute forced, such as NTLM version 1, removing of configurations such as unconstrained Kerberos delegation, which is known to be abused, usually chained with other exploits in order to gain a better foothold in the environment, and also making sure that no rogue app is, for example, exposing users using clear text credentials susceptible to man-in-the-middle interception, gaining attackers more credential to work with, and is also known to be used in attacks in the wild. These are just a couple of examples of the identity security posture assessment part of Defender for Identity, which currently include 11 different assessment. Each assessment might include several different calculations regarding what need to be remediated. And it's also important to note that this type of assessment currently positioned in the Cloud of Security portal of Microsoft start to evaluate your environment automatically after you've deployed Defender for Identity. If you haven't checked this section, I highly recommend that you go to and look for it, actively look for it. It's super interesting. You might find things that are super relevant to your environment. And again, there is really no additional configuration other than getting Defender for Identity deployed on your domain controllers and ADFS servers, and mentioning and configuring the Active Directory service account, which is required by the sensor to talk to the on-premise Active Directory. And the team is also keep improving both these assessment and also the components that Defender for Identity can sit on. For example, we recently introduced the ability for Defender for Identity sensor to be installed on the Active Directory federation servers, the ADFS servers, and we keep working based on feedback such as yourself in order to know how we can even do better. So this assessment gives you like a thumbs up or a thumbs down in regards to what needs to be deployed. They are continuously evaluated and aimed toward providing really step-by-step instructions into what you should do next. One of the assessments that we show, for example, is all the entities, devices, and accounts that are currently transmitting credentials using ldap simplebind, which is a form of authentication that does not use any encryption. And in this example, we see that Vienna Mosley is one of these accounts. This account is also a sensitive account, manually tagged by the Defender for Identity. Defender for Identity can either automatically tag account as sensitive if it detects that they are a member of a sensitive group, such as a domain admin or enterprise admin, and they can also be manually tagged. So for example, the Vienna Mosley can be the CFO of the company, not a domain admin, but a super important user that we should definitely don't want his or she's credential being exposed in clear text. So this report will show you all of the entities that are currently doing that, hopefully to be remediated holistically by changing a group policy setting. But the fact is that we need to find what is the underlying reason of a particular app on Vienna Mosley's device, probably that is using his account in this form of legacy or dangerous communication. Another example is the Microsoft Labs usage report. Microsoft Labs, or local administrator password solution, is a free tool that takes the local administrator account on any device or server and randomize their password into Active Directory and constantly change it based on configuration in order for a situation where all of your devices were imaged from the same image, which may contain a hard-coded administrator password. And attackers look for just that. If they found a single local administrator password, they try to reuse it against another device. That way, um, they can bypass a lot of the authentication protection done by Active Directory by using local administrator password. Microsoft Labs aim toward removing that vulnerability or misconfiguration by randomizing the password. So what Defender for Identity does, it looks for a situation where you have a domain where not all of the devices are protected by Microsoft Labs and provide you with a report understanding what you need to do next in order to have Labs fully deployed. Labs is a really, really good example of things that are sometimes overlooked by environment, and it's a freeware tool that Microsoft recommend deploying in your environment. Risky lateral movement path. So a few words about what is a lateral movement path. When an attacker get into a particular device, the users or the device itself might not represent a very interesting target because it might not contain the information or the privileges that attackers usually look for when they want to achieve something. So for example, deploying ransomware in the entire environment. A lateral movement path, what we observed that they're doing is using tools, community-based tools such as Bloodhound, to map out different paths to a more privileged user, and then move laterally using tools such as Mimikatz in order from a device to a device, harvesting credentials, eventually getting into a sensitive enough user. Defender for Identity automatically maps this path for you. For example, Nick Carlson, which is a sensitive user, he has 7 non-sensitive entities that if an attacker can compromise either of them, they could get, through lateral movement path, getting Nick Carlson credentials. So what Defender for Identity does is providing you with recommended actions in order what you need to do. For example, removing local administrator permission for Jeff from a particular server that Jeff is an admin and Nick is logged on to, making it so if we remove these privileges from this particular server, then Nick Carlson lateral movement path risk will be reduced as a consequence. As we've seen a lot of time, even performing, in this case, this will remove one entity from the seven non-sensitive users that can compromise Nick, but oftentimes we calculate how much user will be removed by performing this seemingly simple action, and sometimes it's by the hundreds. So it's a really, really interesting, and again, this is a thing that capability that Defender for Identity really thrive on, and our customers are really excited about. So I encourage you to check that out. Another example is Kerberos delegation. So Kerberos delegation, again, Kerberos is a mechanism to protect authentication. It's an authentication protocol that is designed to be protected, but again, due to known misconfiguration, it can be abused and be susceptible to access replay. So in this case, we present you with all the cases of Kerberos authentication or delegation type that are known to be abused, such as simple unconstrained setting, meaning this particular device is configured toward unconstrained Kerberos delegation. So users can request the TGT ticket of that device, and if this device is a sensitive entity, then it's not good. And of course, there's also cases where a particular setting inside of the delegation for test user is something that needs to be remediated. We'll have a quick demo about it in the demo section. And of course, the simple attributes of the specific accounts can also be known to be misconfigured. So for example, we have several type of unsecure account attributes that are easily represented. And I think maybe we should get to the demo of fixing several forms of unsecure configurations. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch over to both my environment, which has several this is a live demo, so we need the demo gods with us. Let me quickly refresh that.
It's pretty fast.
Okay, so in the cloud of security, I'm going to go into the identity security posture part. And in this environment, I can see that I have several assessments that need to be remediated. So first, we're gonna have a look at the unsecure account attributes. In here, we see that we have a user called RLEM Banks, which is part of domain one, which has two types of unsecure account attributes. If I click on that, I be presented with exactly what are the attributes that need to be remediated, such as use Kerberos DES encryption, which is using an older type of encryption for this account authentication, which is not recommended. This is against Microsoft security best practices, but it's still available, probably due to some legacy app or a misconfiguration or even an overlooked option in the environment. And also an option that this user password is stored using irreversible encryption. And yes, I know why would we want to store something using irreversible encryption, but again, in Active Directory, a product from the 2000 era, it a lot of the time, because of legacy requirement or some check that was overlooked. Regardless, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Active Directory. I'm going to copy that username, and I'm going to go into my domain controller. And in here, I'm going to go into users and devices, and I'm going to search for that particular user. And in this user configuration, I'm going to go into account. Again, all of this is explained in the how-to part of the assessment. And in here, I can see that they have a checkbox called store password using reversible encryption. And also a checkbox called use Kerberos DES encryption for this account. Once I click OK, Defender for Identity is going to detect this change and is going to remove that particular user from that assessment. Once I remove all of the users, I can have a green check mark on this particular assessment, and I can know that my environment does not have any unsecure account configured. The second option that I want to show you is the Kerberos delegation option. In here, I have several devices and accounts. For example, app1, which is a device that has unconstrained Kerberos delegation assigned to it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that device, and I'm going to have also see test user one, which is a honey token account. Again, this type of account are being actively used by Defender for Identity to catch malicious behavior. And also app one, as you can see, is an exchange server, high value asset. And for test user one, I was able to see that it doesn't have a unsecure Kerberos authentication enabled, but rather has a domain specific constraint delegation for the clip SRV service and points to DC1, which is a sensitive entity, a domain controller. So for removing both, I'm going to go back to my domain controller. I'm going to start with test user 1. And in here, if I click on that account, I can go into the delegation tab, and I can see that it points to two different type of service and two different type of devices, standalone and domain controller 1. What I need to do is remove that particular one, again, after verifying that this is not going to cause issues in my environment, but again, this is a path for escalation for attackers. So what Defender for Identity does is calculating the risk, but I also recommend better understanding what this user, why someone configured it that way. I click OK, and now I'm going to go into app 1, which is a device. And in here, it's marked for unconstrained Kerberos delegation. I'm going to either configure to a more secure constrained delegation or remove the delegation altogether. This one is not recommended in any case, unless this is a domain controller. Once I remove that, again, Defender for Identity, detect these changes, go back to the environment and modify the assessment itself. The last example that I wanted to show you is the lateral movement path assessment. So in here, this is a different environment. And again, I remember that I need to close it and open it again. And in here, if I go to the user page, which is now part of the Microsoft 365 security portal, I can see that for Nick Carlson, that are several lateral movement paths that are available. This tab happened because Defender for Identity detects that Nick Carlson is both a sensitive user and is also logged into devices that are being logged out by non-sensitive entities. And so I can see all of the entities that can get to Nick Carlson using multiple steps. And guess what? This is exactly what the bad guys will want to do when they get an initial foothold in the environment. They run tools like Bloodhound or any third-party tool, and they map out all of these paths, and then they try to exploit it. In Defender for Identity, I can see that the risky lateral movement path assessment now lights up. And as you've seen in the slides, it showed me exactly why Nick Carlson is sensitive, because it's a member of 3 sensitive group, including domain admin. And so these are the action that I can take in order to remove some people from being a local administrator on a particular server. Okay, so we've learned that assessments are things that are both a lot of the time that are just one click away from fixing, but they also need to be remediated, and you do need to understand exactly why this particular setting would put in the first place. But as we've learned, attacks does not get worse, they only get better. And so we've seen several publications such as what we call the printer bug, which relies on attackers utilizing a particular service on sensitive servers such as domain controller that is known to be active, such as the print spooler, which is from security standpoint is not recommended to be turned on, alongside a particular service that is configured to unconstrained Kerberos delegation, meaning that an attacker can utilize both of these misconfiguration into getting the domain controller computer account, which is a highly thought after account in the environment. So in Secure Score, we can also take all of this information. So in here, you see, again, the Microsoft 365 security portal. If you go into Secure Score, which is part of the left nav bar, you can see security configuration from all the different components, and you can filter by Defender for Identity. And in here, you can also see that a couple of those assessment already are relevant for what we call the printer bug, such as modify the unsecure Kerberos delegation, and also disable print spooler on service on domain controllers. And we can tell you that if you mitigate both of them, your chance of being exploited by using this known attack vector is greatly diminished. So we're going to go back into the environment, this time not logging into the, well, we can log into the domain controller, but we're going to go into secure score, which is again part of the security.microsoft.com portal. In here, we can see that we have multiple improvement actions coming from all the different products that we've deployed. We're going to focus on the Defender for Identity product, which show us that should show us the security configuration. Okay. Okay, this is a demo environment, so the gods has not been kind to us. So what we can see that if we go into the security posture, we can see that we have servers with unsecure Kerberos delegation, and such as app1, which we previously remediated. And we can also see that we have in the domain controllers with principal or service enabled, we have a list of domain controllers that have the principal or service not set to disable, meaning in the recommendation is to disable it. So we're going to go back in the environment, DC1 in this case. This time, we're going to go into the services configuration. We're going to look for the principal service, and we're going to disable it and stop it. That way, again, Defender for Identity will remove that server. And since we set it this service type to disabled, we can verify that it's keep getting disabled. If by any type of configuration the service get re-enabled, Defender for Identity will alert us. And yes, by disabling the print spooler capability on domain controller, we are losing some print capabilities, but in the name of security, this should not be running on a service such as domain controller. For our final part of the session, we're gonna look again at one of the assessment. Entities exposing credential in clear text. Again, something that you should really don't want to see in your environment. But as I mentioned before, Defender for Identity sits on top of the domain controller, meaning that is able to catch this type of authentication and are able to tell you that a particular user, test user 2 or other sensitive users are being exposed in action. But what we can tell you from the domain controller side is what is happening on the endpoint itself that is causing this type of communication that can cause potential issues in your environment. Luckily, we've also deployed Defender for Endpoint on these devices, the endpoints. But if we go into client 5 in this case, which is a Windows 10 device, and we look for network events and we look for port 389, we might see too many actions that are coming and are being using ldap against the domain controller because we're searching for this type of communication, but this is all ldap communication, which from a domain John device might be pretty significant. And so we want to use better tools in order to really understand what needs to happen next. So so advanced hunting to the rescue. Going back into my cloud environment, advanced hunting, a capability in the security portal. In this capability, all of the products, including in this case, apps and identities coming from Defender for Identity and Cloud of Security, email coming from Defender for Office 365, and devices coming from Defender for Endpoint, all being aggregated into a single console where we can run powerful queries with easy to understand language. In this case, I'm going to show you that I'm going to use two tables from these. Well, there's quite a lot, but there are also a lot of examples in here. By the way, the query that I'm going to show you is part of our suggested queries that the Defender for the Microsoft 365 Defender team has put into the product. So you can find it in here. And in this case, I'm going to utilize two type of tables, identity logon events, which will show me if I run it, all the LDAP in clear text authentication that happened in the last 7 days. And here we can see that we have a device called client 5 and the account name admin, which are being exposed in LDAP in clear text. By the way, if you want to show more visibility into what's happening, we can open the entities exposing credential in clear text, and we can see that admin and the client file, which is combination of device and account, is being actively being used, and we can see what is the last time that they've done that. And admin is a super admin or an enterprise administrator, which is really not an account that we would like to see transmitting its credential in clear text. So that's what Defender for Identity provides us. And as you see in the screenshot, the device network events, which is equivalent to what Defender for Endpoint see, if we, again, take a look at the last 7 days, we can see a lot of processes and a lot of account names and a lot of devices that are being used to LDAP communication. So between those two separate queries, it's hard to understand what needs to happen. So we're going to join them. We're going to use the same queries. We're going to use a join clause, which is something that is for the SQL folks out there. It should be fairly simple to understand. And if not, KQL, which is the language that we use here, is really very good, very powerful language to have to find more complex stuff like this. And we're going to combine the same device and the same account name. Basically, we're going to join these two tables where the same device and the same account name in the margin of 2 minutes from each other. And we're going to run this query. And the output is going to show us that we have one user admin who is using two type of processes, ldp.exe and background task host, to communicate in LDAP in clear text. The next thing that I'm going to do is talk to whoever is in charge of that device and that user to understand why this process is exposing that user, sensitive user credentials in clear text. And if we go back to my environment and we're going to log on into client 5, we are seeing that, yes, there is a process. It is actually running, and we need to shut it down and prevent it from running again. Maybe try to understand why this process was run in the first place, try to understand more context, but at least we have a very, very good, clear understanding of what type of potential malicious communication is running in my environment, and we have all the tools that we need in order to shut it down. Of course, there is a group policy that will prevent any LDAP simplebind from happening, but LDP might be a line of business application being used in my environment, meaning that if I actively block it using tool that I have, such as Defender for Endpoint or group policy to prevent it, something in my environment might break. So it's always better to have a very good visibility into what's happening and then create an action plan in order to mitigate that. And with this final demo, we will before we get to the Q&A session, I like to quickly summarize what we've seen here. So Defender for Identity, which is part of the Microsoft 365 Defender suite. Once it's deployed, automatically start monitoring your environment in the form of security assessment that can be accessed both in the Cloud of Security portal and in the M365 or Microsoft Secure Score product, unlike the demo that we've seen. And you can have a really broad visibility and not a lot of prerequisite into getting a more better view into what's happening in your environment and provide you with the tools that you need in order to take action and improve your security posture. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on this webinar. And Ricky, what type of question that we've got during it?
Yeah, so had a couple of questions related to licensing, of course, any type of products that talked about. So I just wanted to make clear that Defender for Identity is part of Microsoft 365 E5, but it can also be obtained as a standalone product as well. And hopefully that covers off some of the kind of repeated licensing questions that we saw coming in. I'm just looking through the list now to see anything else that was asked repeatedly. Yeah, I think that's it. That was the majority of the repeated questions were coming in against licensing. And we had some around where the data is represented in secure score, which we managed to answer off as well, and which you covered off in your presentation, which was great. So yeah, I think we're all good.
Great. I also like to remind you that one of our assessments is actually toward one of the best thing to have when you're looking for security posture issues is making sure that all of your environment is covered. And for that, one of our security assessment actually looks for all of the domain controllers and pretty soon also ADFS servers that you haven't deployed or actively being monitored by the Defender for Identity sensor, which is a very easy component to install. But again, you need to make sure that all of your domain controllers are monitored. So if you're not sure if your environment is fully monitored, let me go back to my environment. And one of the assessment is called domain controllers that are unmonitored. In my environment, everything is monitored. So this is completed. In your environment, you might see here domain controllers that are not actively reporting to the Defender for Identity cloud tenant. And one of the things that we need to do is making sure that they are all fully deployed, which again, it's something that your security teams know how to do, but it's also better to actively look or check that everything is deployed. All right, Valon.
Well, great. Yes, thank you, Or. For an excellent presentation. And of course, thank you, Bonnie Jofferly and Ricky Simpson for answering the questions during Or's presentation. And please remember that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars like this or major announcements, you can visit us at aka.ms/security community. And you'll find there easy ways to navigate and find resources and community related material, products. And a good start would be, in fact, just browsing through our bite-size product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of the past webinars, and the GitHub communities and more. And in case we missed to answer your question, or if you have additional questions, you can visit us on our Microsoft Defender for Identity forum at aka.ms/MDI community. I would like to close this webinar by thanking all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. So we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.